Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talks. These talks are live from Bristol every Friday, 1 p.m. and are beaming out on smartphones, laptops, tablets and living room TVs. We're broadcasting live now on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, so you've got your pick of channels to watch on. When we can, we host our lunchtime talks as hybrid events with the option to watch online or join us in person in the studio. For now, talks are online only, but we look forward to welcoming you to our building again soon. I'm Danielle Rose, and I'm one of the newest members of the Watershed team. My role is network producer. I'm a white woman with long blonde hair, and I'm wearing a blue festive jumper with penguins with party hats on. And I'm sat in a room with a wardrobe visible behind me. These lunchtime talks are our chance to throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. The talks cover everything from innovative research in the fields of creativity and technology to projects in progress, which are in need of feedback, questions, and curious minds. An especially big welcome to those who are new to the studio, for whom this may be the first time you're engaging with us. Here's a little bit more about what we do. The Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, exploring everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We are a partnership between Watershed, the University of the West of England, and University of Bristol. The studio is a home for embryonic ideas, research and development of new ideas, and the building of new companies. And we're a meeting place of both creative and commercial industries. We offer studio space, offering desk space, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities to all our residents. We are a space for people and companies to take risks in their practice and to make time for collaboration. Our last talk of every month is BSL Interpreted. This is our last talk of December and this year, so today's talk is also BSL Interpreted. A captioned and recorded version of the talk will also be available online a short while after the talk is finished. And there will be a Q&A at the end of the talk. If you are watching online, please pop your questions in the YouTube chat. We'll answer as many as we can within the time available. You can get news on all our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, following us on PM Studio UK on Twitter or Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel and subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Now I'd like to introduce today's talk and speaker. Today's talk is titled Public Spaces and Digital Voices. We are joined by Tine Bech, one of the studio residents. Tine will discuss her work creating social interaction and colour in public spaces. Born in Denmark, Tine now lives and works in London. Tine has a PhD in interactive art and play theory. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Tine, and over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here online with you and a really nice opportunity to show the work that we do at my studio. I don't work alone always, sometimes there's people with me, but here today I'm on my own and I'm really delighted to be here. As Danielle said, I'm Danish, I'm blonde, and I'm currently in London and in my sort of office room where I live, and the background has some really sort of beautiful black and white, pink kind of like designed paintings, and also a black sort of space kind of like painting, and they're from artist friends that we sometimes swap our works, and so I'm lucky to have artworks on my walls behind me. I'm going to talk about my work and going to show you lots of visuals, lots of color, and I look forward to any questions you might have afterwards. Okay, all right, so we're going to start with, I'm going to start with sharing a few I have this amazing clicker that I'm controlling my slides with. I'm just going to start by telling a little bit, like a quick sort of introduction to what we do at the studio. We create public art. There's a huge interest in public art for us. We do light art, we do interactive installations, we do sculptures and games. And we really try to create work that has a sense of wonder and has a sense of social exchange in them. We work in public spaces, from bridges to gardens. We work in commercial spaces. So sometimes this is from the city in London to show work there. And I also work in galleries. This is up from the Whitworth. And what recognizes all these works is that they're all about developing really inventive and social spaces for people of all ages to intuitively interact and actively participate. And it's really important that it doesn't matter if you know technology or you know art, you can step in and have an experience. And then there's different levels that you can go through depending on how long you stay with the artwork. What I find really interesting about working with interactive art and play is that it makes us social. So I've done lots of observations where I talk to people, I look at what we do, because play inherently is so unpredictable. And when we create those social spaces, it is the audience themselves, it's the participations that happens that sort of creates the final work. And I love when I hear that someone says, I had so much fun, I forgot to be embarrassed, because one of the barriers is to step into the barriers, the boundaries of the barrier, the barriers to step into participation is something we work with, and understanding what makes us not participate and how play enable us to take that step into participation. And particularly in today's world, which is an increasingly automated interactive environment, play really becomes a perfect call to action and to participation. So the swing, everybody knows, you can see a swing and everybody knows that that is an invitation to play. We know what it's like. And that's the wonderful thing about play, is that the hallmark of it is that everybody can play. It's not something you have to read a manual. It's not something that you have to download an app. Everybody has that feeling and memory of play. But what is important in this kind of scenario of play and interactive technology is that these artworks becomes about it's not about our relations to technology, but it's about new ways of experiencing culture, new ways of experiencing art, the disrupted gallery rather than silent contemplation we might have in front of a painting. It's the noise and the laughter in the gallery, and it's new ways of connecting and new ways of communicating that's at the core of these interactions. And I'm going to show you 4 different projects that is very much about just everything that Daniel was talking about, that how having the opportunity to work in different public spaces and how people are participating and how there's a voice through that participation. And I'm going to end up sharing an R&D project, which is not something which is finalized, which is very much about digital voices. So the first project is called Pink Enchantment, and it's very much that visual, large-scale visual invitation to play and interaction in a public space. This is up here in Iceland, and here is our beloved bridge in Bristol, which we did in 2020, just before the lockdown actually, and it's a fun memory we have for transforming a bridge and connecting those 2 sides and watching people interact and play. It's the large scale kind of pull, you can see something from afar that evokes that curiosity, that evokes that the ephemeral kind of the fog, that evokes us to come close and stand and step into it. And using that visuals is really important. The installation describing it is a bridge here with blue lights, and when there's nobody there, it stays blue. And when you walk across it, you activate these big sort of, I call them pink clouds, but they're pink bubbles of smoke that gets activated, and the winds make them flow away. And then as you walk across, you get these pink bubbles or clouds or smoke bombs activating as you go across. The sensors are sensor activated. Oh, sorry, Jack, please cue video.
It can make any bridge into a stunning piece of artwork. I'm inspired by nature, so I had the idea of the colours for this when I looked at the sky. The blue and the pink and the red that comes out, and it's the fog that hovers over a river or the ocean in the morning. My studio, Tine Bech Studio, creates interactive spaces that invite social interaction, that invites people. No matter your knowledge of your art, you can come and interact, you can have an experience of the art. After all, public spaces is made for human interaction. That's the original use, isn't it? For us to connect in public spaces, for bridges to connect between two sides. So in some ways the art becomes something which is a symbol of that. It becomes a moment where you can have a, you know, an interesting kind of encounter in the fog.
Thank you, Jack. All right, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. It's at the core of understanding play is that we're all built for social interaction, and we know play from our children, that we all watch them play. But the key is to keep playing, because actually there's a lot of in our biology that shows that when we keep playing, it has benefits for all kinds of well-beings. So we're really, as humans, built for social interaction, both within arts, within our families, and to take those invitations and transform our public spaces is an important aspect of it. And what I see in those moments when you have that visual, that beautiful visual invitation to play, is that people pick it up and they invent all kinds of things. And a lot of photos, a lots of selfies, a lots of running if there's room and there's the people that comes around it. So people invent their own amazing interaction that I would never have anticipated that they do. We had people in Baltimore who came down and took their wedding photo in the fog, you know, so all kinds of lovely social stories happen around these interactive public spaces that invites play. Sorry. And I think in that kind of context, how our, you know, contextualizing in some ways to our pandemic is that we have so much new urban kind of activities that are emerging in our cities. Our cities are transforming, and we have our knowledge now about how our shared public spaces has become so important. If you remember in the pandemic, we talked about where is our shared spaces because we were all stuck inside, and it really highlighted how a shared public space is so important today more than ever. And in that kind of context, I'm going to show you Color Me Beautiful, which is really about creating people first public spaces, places that will nurture us and make us flourish, that invites us to be creative and interactive, and places that, oh, sorry, I lost my mouse there for a moment. There we go. That goes from this, so places that did look like that, that becomes this, which is full of the invitation and visual invitation to interactivity and play. And that is both daytime and nighttime in our, you know, that it's a place both daytime and nighttime. Sorry, I can't actually read my slides anymore because they're so blurred. Maybe the connection is. So they're places that encourage us to play, where we can develop our confidence, you know, the mastery of play. Once we figure out how we do something, you know, how we can play, we'll stay for longer. And I watch lots of people play in various different ways with this, and how they develop the mastery and the sort of like letting go of everyday life for a moment in those interactive moments in front of Color Me Beautiful. I have a video of Color Me Beautiful as well that we will show. Jack, if you key the Color Me Beautiful as well, where you will see Color Me Beautiful in action.
Color Me Beautiful is a large interactive artwork. It invites audiences to walk up a runway, strike a pose and be captured in 5 different colors on a large screen. As people walk up either pink, yellow, blue runways, when they come to the end, a camera opens up at the top of the screen and there's a countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. and you're flashed and your photo is taken. And as people play, the photo shuffles down, and as more and more people play, the photos disappears, and as such the work is transient. If you walk up the red one way, you'll get a photo of yourself in red. If you walk up the pink, you'll strike a pose and you'll become pink. So there's a beautiful colour overlay deliberately created to create a colour matrix that enchants you into interacting. The work in itself invites play and performance in public spaces and invites us to be social, interacting with our families, with our friends and with strangers. I believe that play is important to society as a whole. It is part of our social fabric and lies at the core of many of our social bonds.
Thank you, Jake. What you could see there, hopefully, was streaming well, was lots of play, and that sometimes is the reward, or often or always, I would say, the reward once the work is up and running. And we step back from the technique, from the visuals, from everything, and let people take over, and you'll see people inventing all kinds of play. I watched a boy being really clever, figuring out that the screen would take a photo of him, and then people quite often will jump up, try to get caught on the camera in the mid jump, but he ran out of the image. So he was creating empty color images, or empty color lay images. And this color overlay that you see here is what is going to be, I'm going to talk about in my next work. But what is important to us is that this play and interactive and this sort of kind of public space gathering, it really creates a space where you often see people smile, and you see people really staying and creating lots of interactions and kind of engaging with the place itself and connecting with strangers in their play, which becomes our social fabrics. It also becomes reimagining Colour Me Beautiful is seeing yourself in colour. And I'm really interested in how we can reimagine place through colour. And this project is called Shine Your Colours. And it's a glass project, and we showed a first version of it at Canary Wharf this summer, and they're large, thick glass planes that you can come up to, and you look through the world and see colour, just like you did at the previous slide. But what also happens is that people will play, they'll take photograph, or they will play with each other. So again, it's a place where, without technology this time, that takes the idea of color, that takes the idea of seeing the world in a different color, to see each other in color and change our perspective and play and interact. And I'm increasingly interested in how the materiality of these calls to action, the materiality of the colors and the glass, invites us into a place and makes us connect and makes us have a conversation with each other, which I think we need more than ever in these situations. So this is a more static, non-interactive, and yet interactive artwork. And it kind of creates a different version of a place almost, that looking through it. And what people also did when they were walking through these colors was, what you can also see is that how the color changed. So the pink and yellow, when you were watching through it at another side, it became orange. So that it's like you're having a color palette, and the world around you changes in the color. And as you move, you change your visions of it. And we're hoping to put a larger version of it up in Coventry. I'm hoping to put it into the ground. We were standing on this ground just before the pandemic and the lockdown, and we're about to put it in. So I'm so delighted that the possibility of actually coming up again and doing it. But so far, the work is there at Canary Wharf if you wanted to go and see it. Hopefully we'll light it up for the dark period of time and see what that happens then. And this color idea, taking from Colour Me Beautiful, seeing the interactive screen and making a matrix of different color, putting them together. And then having glass, a physical kind of thing, seeing the world through color, transforming the space through that, leads us into an R&D project that I've been working with Tarim, who's also a studio resident and who's not with us today as he's working on another project, which is launching very soon, or has launched, I don't actually know. It's with another artist. And this is really a project that was developed through the pandemic lockdown. We're very lucky to get R&D money. And the aim for this project is to develop a digital, kind of almost pandemic-proof version of taking your phone and scanning the world for color and seeing it color and finding different color palettes. There is actually a video on this slide. I don't know, Jake, if you could click the green and you could click that, you could see the phone, because it's just a screen recording of my phone because it's not yet public, this piece of work. So Jack, if you were to click on the, I don't know, there's a bit of an echo, then you could see basically, I'm not sure that works. Thank you. I got a bit of echo now, Jake. This Place in Color R&D project is a phone app, a web app, where you can scan the world for color. Do we still have echoing? I still have echoing. All right. A little bit of technique there. You can see basically, yeah, that's great. You can, as you move your phone around, there's a color immersion. And if you link that to Color Me Beautiful, where you went up on a runway and kind of like strutted your stuff and took a photo, here you have the immersion of finding color around you via your phone. Once you find colors, you unlock a set of questions, which are sort of place questions, really quirky, fun place questions that you can answer. And by answer them, you become part of a color grid online, an artwork online. I'm going to slide to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah. And those action questions are questions which are like, what would the post box say about your place? They're designed to be quirky, to be fun, to be playful. And if you answer those questions via your phone, you're scanning for color in the world, you see some of the questions here, and those questions are also on a website that's linked to the app. So the project is really a digital project. It's the first time I kind of stepped completely into a digital development, taking the idea of color and place and putting it onto a web app and a website that collects the colors that people find or catch, if one was. And those questions are prompts for us to think about our places that we're at. They're really fun, beautiful color questions. And this is a real screen snap of how the work is envisioned to look at. So once you catch a color, you won't actually send your real photo in because there's lots of issues about media privacy around it, but it would become a sort of color grid, a very Mondrian-like color grid where people, their answers about their place will be shown. And if you hover over with your mouse over the color block, you'll see what the question was. So that's at the core of the concept of This Place in Color. We hope to launch it, and we hope to launch it in connection with other projects in order to kind of catch colors around us as a way of wayfinding, as a way of having a digital voice about our places. And again, it is this place, color aspect, and also thinking about how our places are changing, particularly perhaps in the kind of context of the pandemic. The high street, nobody's going to the high street as much as they used to, and perhaps that high street was also changing already before the pandemic. But if we think about the high street as a market where that's the social gathering place historically, where we go to exchange information, to become social, to learn, And so the question is, how can we transform our high streets to become something better that is not purely a commercial enterprise, even though we certainly need that for business to survive? And how could we use digital voices and art and creative views of that world to figure out what it is will be the best way forward? And for this place in color, it's a sort of a tool for articulating digital voices, but it's through color and place. The website, that if you go up to this place in color website, once it launches, you can search for a color. You can see other color people have found. You can search around you. So essentially you could see all the pink kind of like blocks coming up, like I would call it a pink Mondrian. So there's a visual reference for me to a Mondrian. So you can also see what other people are saying in your area. And that's this place in color. We also would like to have a wisdom place, wisdom place, where people can voice things they've seen. I've put up a photo, I will put up a photo that I took of a street in Denmark where someone had a community fridge where they put things that they didn't need into the fridge and other people could pick it up. I mean, this was before the pandemic, and now we're sort of all scared in that kind of way. But this idea of how we as citizens can share and communicate and create change without it needing to be initiated from somewhere else, and what tools we need to do that, and how play and color and place can be part of that. Because at the end and at the core of what we do, people are at the heart of place, and play is at the heart of everything. And once we take that invitation to play, our place, our surroundings becomes open to different things to happen and for change to happen. And when people take that invitation to play, we start caring, we start engaging. And that's the power of the play, is that we suddenly look at art, we look at each other, we see place in a different way, and we create that social space. And we can connect. I don't know if there's sound for that. I'm gonna jump on that. This is and we can connect on a larger scale. So this is just the last two slides I'm showing you. This was a project where we connected two cities. We connected my hometown Aarhus through light and color, and London. So we connected two buildings, and for me it represented the ability through play and color and place to connect people, where we had a control room that controlled two buildings of power, the embassy in London and the Danish city, and the city hall in my hometown Aarhus, through a control room that gave the power to the people to change through color. And that was my last slide. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tine. That was really, really fascinating. Thank you so much. Very shortly, we will be taking questions from the audience, which we have received via YouTube comments. So if you are watching today and you do have a question, please do post your questions or comments into the chat. Tine, I wanted to ask you, the pandemic, I think you touched on it a bit, the pandemic has really highlighted the unequal access to outdoor and green spaces and spaces to play. And I wanted to hear more about how that's influenced your work and the urgency of it.
It's a good question. I mean, I obviously also observed it, and I observed what happened in my area, and I also observed how almost a new community evolved, because the idea of the 5-mile city, or that everybody stays local, and that so there's the hyper-local, as we would call it today, became something that suddenly was a new topic to look at for me. And I think there's a lot of power in the hyper-local, but there's also the town centres. The high street is then the loser in this. So is it, how do you create an equal spaces and places? But I we started looking at how parks can also become more playable, how structures, and that's very much the playable cities, which is the infrastructures and structures we have around us. How can they become more inviting, and how can they become more playable, places to exercise, places to socialize, and how can we use this opportunity of the pandemic, which is a hardship. But we know from history that, global crises shape our societies and cities. So in that, the wide boulevards of Paris was not created, it was created through revolution, so the military could march through the wide boulevards and get to the people who was rebelling faster. Or the lungs of our cities were created because the smog was so bad, so it became the lung to breathe and have better air to breathe. And we take those things for granted today, but some of those things come through crisis. And I think it's important that the kind of idea of art and people and play and place are at our agenda. So who owns the public space? So more people have a voice, and young people have a voice in that say, because they're the future of users of that public space.
Thank you. I'm now going to go to a question that we've had from the audience. So Tony, first of all, said that I love this talk. Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sorry. I feel like the tangible, tactile element of play is a huge part of the power of it. Do you think anything is lost from that when moving into digital spaces?
Oh, that's a really good question, Tony. I thought a lot about that, because the R&D funding that we had to create this place in Cala I really tried very hard to not lose that tangible physical element of play, because it's very much at the core of what I do, because it has this gesture, it's a dance with technology, or the wonderful tactility of glass, which one should think is a cold thing, but it's actually really lovely and yummy almost in itself. So I think there is a danger, and yet I think our play behavior changes as our technology changes. Once upon a time we didn't do selfies, but now we have lots of fun play that happens with selfies. So our play behavior will change as our technology changes. I think some digital play online is of interest to me and some are not. I tend to like the immersive digital. So when the Wii came out, I liked playing that because it fitted with my play personality, one could say, because it also had a physical element. And I hope that that online play we have can also retain some of that. I mean, we saw some of the first kind of like Wii art that came after the Wii, that, that where we had more like physical movement in front of our screens, like Color Me Beautiful had. Those types of things. It's a mix of those, isn't it? But I know that it's the game engine, the online player is a much more still kind of like avatar type of play. So I don't have an answer. I think there is a danger in it. I think it's I would never lose my own physical play, but I think also we grow up different and our play will change as our technology change. Good question.
Thank you. We've got another question as well. So again, Joe Lansdowne says, thank you so much. And can you talk a little bit about how you define what makes something a public space? Is it about ownership, behavior, or access, for example?
Well, that's a really good question. Thank you, Joe. I don't have a specific definition. There will be lots of different definitions about public space, and public space has been a political debate in, from, Marxist actually, I would say, even though I'm not a Marxist, I haven't read it, I'm not political in that kind of way. But I think public space can be found and claimed. So I think the pandemic showed that. So for instance, where I live, and I live in a block, which means I don't have outside space, we claimed the kind of spaces around us and made them ours. So there was a claiming of the little pocket hidden spaces and places we have around us, and that defined and it became a public space. Then there was some from the leaseholder, the estate holder. There was some sort of negotiations around that, but essentially we just took the place and did it. In other ways, public space is part of our city plannings. It's part of our what we value. It's part of what we vote for. It is part of Yeah, it's quite interesting because there's a lot of places that we think that's public spaces, but they're actually owned by other people. So that's a very hidden conversation, isn't it? So I would say, one, it's those spaces we claim. It's actual city planning and supporting city planning and having a voice in city planning and being vocal, those digital voices. And then it's the awareness of that, in fact, a lot of those spaces we go to are actually owned by someone else. And what does that mean? And that's an interesting, almost like if we could bubble a hidden map up to the surface. And I think also the micro hidden places are very important in this kind of conversation because they can become ours.
Thank you, team. Some very important points there. And I think it kind of leads us nicely on to the next question from Lewis, which is, how do you feel the pandemic will impact in the longer term on how we might play in public spaces together?
Oh, such a good question. I mean, say the optimist would be, yes, we will. Just like I saw more people play outside. There was a whole gang of kids, running around outside our blog. I literally was like, you did have people complain, and then some people, which I would be one of them, saying, no, this is good, this is good. And so that was a positive change. And we also saw cycling becoming, I'm in London, we saw cycling suddenly lanes coming up, and that's a positive change as well. So I think it has accelerated some of the good things that was in development, and it has, but it also made us aware where we need to be careful and have those digital voices or the physical voices for our spaces. I think we also became more digital. We're now here online, which means that that's a positive thing. We're actually connecting online. I didn't travel to Bristol, which I normally would have done and happily had done. So it also created some online communities, which are maybe online spaces that are in the same way. The fear obviously is that public money is less off, and where does money go in this sense? And I think that it's really important to keep the movement of, like, for instance, bicycle lanes, etc., going, and not lose the momentum in that way.
Thank you. We have another question from Rob. What advice would you give to PhD students or other emerging artists and designers interested in creating opportunities for social exchange in public spaces?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, in the sense of PhD, it's a long haul. I'm Danish, I'm dyslexic. Doing a PhD was like a mountain to climb, and I had to fight a lot of demon that says, oh, you're dyslexic, you don't read, you don't do this, you don't do that, which I think is a far bigger disability than really is visible in the world. So that was definitely my Mount Everest. But once my curiosity drove me, and pick a topic you really like, not just one something is good for now or someone else like it. Pick something that makes your heart burn and wants to get up and learn about it. So learn because not you want to be something in some job, but because that's what you want to learn, that's what you want to know more about. And for me, it ended up being a positive experience doing a PhD, enhanced my art practice. It became deeper. It gave me a theoretical reference. Some of those I was talking about today, I learned, I observed what people did, and my artworks became better, became more open, more democratic in some way in its participation. So that, I think that's really important. Get good supervisors, always. I had an amazing supervisor, and my PhD was connected to the Pervasive Media Studio. I can't recommend the space enough. It's a wonderful home for creative development, and it's my creative family in many places. And if I get a bit lost, I go back home and I say, oh, I need to talk to someone. And they're always open. They have an amazing ethos of openness. In the sense of artists working in public spaces, never give up. Keep going, never give up. There's a lot to be said for having that and staying open and curious to how change can happen, and connect with people when you work in public spaces, and be aware there's a lot of protocol about it as well, writing health and safety and things like that, and get help with that if you need it.
Thank you. Some really useful advice there. We've got another question, if we may. From Jade, who just has observed, it's a shame that a lot of public spaces aren't initially designed with public interaction or play in mind.
Mm.
Why do you think this is? And do you think this will change with town planning in the future?
Well, I would hope so. Like some of the other question, I don't know. I mean, I'm totally biased. You know, I believe in the playable city. I believe in playable public spaces. I think they're for the good. I think, you know, in the sense of value for money, if one was to think in that way, in a political kind of way, is that it shows that if we are social and if we are playful, we our well-being, our health is better. So in the big picture, it should be like a no-brainer, shouldn't it? But I think if I'd worked with, when I have worked with council, it's about money, it's about not seeing it, you know, it's about maybe this message is not really at the forefront in other places, it's about something else. It's about tradition and how we see our public places. They are changing. You can see, you know, like that little change when we started having exercise equipment. Do you remember that sort of came out in public spaces, and some people used it, some people didn't. It's sort of a bit of a trial and error, isn't it, how public spaces move? And they're a bit like a big beast, they're a bit slow, you know, lumbering along, you know, and some things work and some things doesn't. But I think it's important to have communities to have a voice. So communities to say, no, we want a garden, we want this. And I think particular artists can be a good, in that way, are good communicators and facilitators working, referring to the last question about, you know, how do you work in social spaces or create that social interactivity? That's sometimes part of commissioning, is that to actually work with the community and represent a voice through that. But I don't really know if I had the answer to why they don't, why doesn't it become part of it? Default, we do what we always do, don't we? We go to the default. That's the danger of most things, is that we just do what we want, what we always do, and change is slow because of that.
Thank you. Perhaps I'll do one more question, and I think it could be a nice one to end on. And it's from Vic. You've shown some amazing pieces of work. Which is your personal favourite and why?
God. Oh, I have many favorites. I think a bit like your, this is a bit cliche, but a bit like your little children, you know, and you kind of make them and then you send them out in the world and you just want them to go out and play and be happy, right? And tour, and in that sense. I really love the ones that are very playful. I didn't show you Catch Me Now, which is a spotlight, which is a really tiny, like it's a small work. It's sort of like a little spotlight that wanders around assumingly, but does generate an enormous amount of really playful behavior. Color Me Beautiful has always been really successful in audience numbers. So like, you know, hitting high audience numbers and allowing it being a work that really allows everybody. It's not everybody to participate. You don't have to queue, you don't have to wait. You can usually just, it has all kinds of layers of art interactivity in it. And that is also wonderful to see. It's a very large scale transformation of a space. And then I think Pink Enchantment, it looked absolutely beautiful on the Bristol Bridge, and it was really lovely to work in Bristol and sort of back home almost. And the ephemeralness of that is really wonderful.
Thank you. We had some other questions which perhaps we don't have time for today, but if anyone does want to get in touch with you, Tina, is there a preferred place for them to contact you or to look up your work online?
Please go to tinebech.com or Tine Bech Studio and see the work, and there's also a contact us. I'm also on Instagram. I am technically also on Twitter, but to be honest, I don't say much on Twitter. I have to admit, the pandemic made me less social. I went less on social media, whereas I think some went more on social media. And I don't quite know why that is. It just, so yeah, I'm very open to having a conversation with people. You can email me or find me on social media. And also I'll stay online afterwards if you want to have a few more chit chats. That's cool.
Great. Thank you so much, Tine. And thank you also to our excellent technician, Jack, and
Yes.
to our BSL interpreters, Nikki and Sherry. Thank you. Now, before you go, our talk series will restart again in the new year on Friday, the 7th of January. The first talk of the year will be by Dr. Victoria Bates of the University of Bristol and Ruben Armstrong, who is an animator and studio resident. Their talk, titled These Sounds Save Lives VR, will unpack their recent collaboration working with hospital soundscapes and immersive animation software. You can get news on all our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, following us on PM Studio UK on Twitter, or Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel and subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you all the same time, the same place, every Friday from the 7th of January.